Good morning. Happy Tuesday. I have my Neuro coffee in hand, and it is perfect. Thank you to Dr. Mike. Had a very busy Tuesday back in clinic. Some element of normal behaviors, which is kind of fun to get back to, so I'm looking forward to that. But since we're busy, we got to dive right into the Q&A. I got a couple questions that came through that I'm thrilled to see because they're kind of similar but different. And they talk about orientations and such, and then how we can influence these things and why we're getting good outcomes or bad outcomes. So this is kind of cool. First one comes from John, and John says, I hope things are going well for you up there in Indianapolis. Thank you, John. He says, it's a rare issue that I see, but if you could cover what to do for a left tensor fasciae lata that will not reduce tone, resist comfortable loading patterns, and drives anterior hip pain, which he describes as burning. I've had 3 patients in the year with this issue, and all the hip extension and guided adduction program that I'm using doesn't seem to connect. Okay, John, so you've got an orientation problem here that you might not be able to identify, or there's a little confounding factor in there that might make this a little bit confusing. So let's go through what the possibilities are, and maybe some of this stuff will jibe with you, and you'll get your aha moment, and then we'll have a solution for you, okay? Since I don't have all the chessboard, I don't have all the information, I got to make a couple educated guesses here. So let's just talk about dead guy anatomy for a second. So the tensor fasciae lata is kind of here-ish. It's on the front side. It's anterior to the trochanter. And so, again, in dead guy anatomy, they say it's a flexor, abductor, internal rotator. So right away, we have a little bit of confusion because you have 2 opposing activities here that the muscle is going to produce. So if it's an internal rotator and an abductor, that means it internally rotates and it externally rotates, which means that the orientation of the pelvis is going to come into play here in probably a pretty major way. So think about an inhaled position of the pelvis right off the bat. So if I ER that ilium, I immediately pick up some concentric orientation. I'm bringing the 2 ends of the muscle close together so it can concentrically orient. But now I got to start playing with other angles. And I got to start looking at where this pelvis is positioned in space. So if I'm more forward, if I'm more anteriorly oriented, that tensor fasciae lata, because it does have concentric orientation, is going to pick up that IR position, so I'm going to lose external rotation. So right away, if my ER measures are reduced, then I know I've got more anterior orientation to play with, and then that's going to influence my decision making as far as my interventions are concerned. If I'm just tilted more what you would consider laterally or abducted as that relative position, I get a tremendous amount of concentric orientation again of tensor fasciae lata, but this time I pick up ER, lose IR. And so under those circumstances, I have to look at the position of my ischial tuberosity here, because as it approximates to the femur, all right, I'm already in what you would consider a hip extended position. And then I'm going to pick up more concentric orientation posteriorly. So not only do I have tensor fasciae lata in a concentric orientation, but I can pick up concentric orientation posteriorly here, and that shoves me forward and anterior on the left. So what happens is I get a sacrum that is now right facing. So if you're trying to extend the hip, as you said, then I'm already in a relatively hip extended position. So that can't be the solution. But what I do have on the other side, because I've got this sacrum oriented to the right, I have an expansive strategy on the right side. So what I would be doing is I would be probably trying to drive a concentric orientation here on this side to get that sacrum to reorient, and then I can actually recapture the exhaled position of this ilium, and chances are your problem is solved. So again, you got to play with the orientation of the pelvis when you're dealing with a lot of this concentric orientation, especially of some muscles that again behave differently based on the orientation of the ilium and based on the orientation of the hip. So John, I hope that helps you a little bit as far as coming up with a strategy. Marcos had a question about one of the videos that I posted on Instagram, which was an armbar video to restore hip external rotation. I think I made reference to the left hip under these circumstances, and it is somewhat similar in regard to what we just talked about with some of the orientation issues. And so Marco says, in the kettlebell arm bar video, you advised externally rotating the shoulder on the inhale, internally rotating the shoulder on the exhale. This makes sense because those shoulder positions align with the breathing cycle. Could you discuss why we want to sequence the breathing pattern this way instead of staying at an end range shoulder internal external rotation and breathing while in a static hold? Well, first and foremost, Marco, great question. And you are correct that you actually could use a static hold under those circumstances, especially for people that have difficulty capturing a position in the first place. I'll use static activities all the time, although I want to try to get to the dynamics as quickly as possible, because when we can reestablish the fluid flows, so the gradients of high pressure to low pressure, high volume to low volume, that's actually what restores range of motion much more effectively. But we're also playing with some iteration in that exercise. So we were dealing with a loss of hip ER. And so, just like we were talking with John's question, I had an anterior orientation, and I had most likely a compressive strategy on the left posterior side, which is going to turn the sacrum. So that means I got a spine that's actually facing the right. And so when we're in the supine arm bar position like we were in the video, you'll remember the cues of staying left side heavy throughout. And so what we're actually doing is we're using an iteration that's within the axial skeleton. So I'm using the shoulder girdle as an iteration of the pelvis to start to turn the spine from its right orientation to its left orientation. And so with every breathing cycle, what we're doing is we're slowly turning the spine from its right orientation to the left. So as I externally rotate and I breathe in, I turn the spine. As I internally rotate and breathe out, I hold that position and create a yielding strategy on the left side because I'm staying left side heavy throughout that exercise. So basically we get this inching around to the left orientation of the spine. We recapture that, and then that allows us to recapture the hip position that's going to help restore that external rotation. So we actually bring the pelvis back and then turn it back to the left, which gives us back our external rotation. So hopefully that also answers your question, Marcos. I appreciate you guys so much for keeping the questions coming, and have a happy Tuesday. I'm going to finish my coffee, grab a quick workout, and then it's off to the clinic. I'll see you guys later.